Good afternoon and welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C. These are your headlines for Thursday, May 24th, 2012. Question for you. What is your favorite Grexit plan? Everyone evidently has one now since that term has been coined. The European Central Bank, meanwhile, is reportedly working on the antithesis of Plan A, not a Plan B. But with all of the discussion of doing this or doing that, would central planner crisis management be better served by doing nothing? It's something our guest Jim Grant has said before. We'll raise the specter of it again today with Ed Harrison, who joins us in studio. And all eyes are focused on every number and news item to come out of Europe more generally. No action from a meeting of Euro leaders. PMI numbers showing the Eurozone's economy contracting. Meanwhile, are people losing sight of the bigger picture of a global slowdown? And is the U.S. going to be in worse trouble than it would be because of the easy distraction from domestic fiscal problems? And there goes that crazy old J.P. Morgan again. Take a look. There J.P. Morgan goes indeed, acting like a greedy Godzilla, trying to go in and light an entire industry that affects ordinary people on fire, all for a few extra quid. We'll tell you why manufacturers are revolting this time against the bank's latest derivatives ploy. And hey, it's no wonder the U.S. banking industry just reported its highest quarterly earnings in years. We'll talk about it. Let's get to today's Capital Account. All right, allow me, if you will, to level with you guys for a moment, because working in broadcast media, I have to admit, it is easy to get sucked into the vortex of the 24-hour news cycle with all of its spin, its nonsense, its manufactured sense of urgency. The world is, of course, infinitely more complex than anything we can express in 30 minutes on this show, yet we keep trying day after day. And today, the major financial news outlets have again turned their focus to Europe. The economic downturn there has persisted, for some countries going on 5 years, with, of course, no end in sight. Talk of a Greek exit. The Grexit, as it has been dubbed, is the talk of the town, quote unquote. Will Greece exit the euro? What will this mean for other economies, for people of Europe, for people of the world? Now, we look at charts, at numbers, at fancy statistics that tell us whether we grew by half a point here or contracted by a quarter of a point there. Today, we learned that the Eurozone member economies jointly contracted this month at the fastest pace in almost 3 years. So some will ask, what does this mean? Or why did this happen? But the media always seems to circle back to the same basic question.
We were talking about whether or not the ECB should be stepping in to do more to support the Eurozone. What's likely then?
Well, the most important thing they have to do is convince investors that they are moving forward, that there is some sort of game plan here, because everybody...
They're talking, of course, about what policymakers will do, should do. But does this question begin from a false premise that highly fallible human beings sitting in ivory towers can somehow fix the lives of 7 billion people simply by pushing the right policy levers, by making a few extra loans or spending a few extra dollars here, euros there? What if the correct response, as our guest Jim Grant has said before in the past, would be to do nothing? Try that on for size. Just maybe, just once. Maybe the world and our policy overlords included should spend less time doing and more time thinking about the mess we have all created with our attempts, one after the other, to fix this or to tweak that, to do something, believing that a handful of bureaucrats can steer and guide an entire mass of people, their lives, and their ambitions. But we are not bureaucrats. Of course, we're not policymakers or central bankers. We are, by force of profession, obliged to think and reflect and occasionally offer our opinion. It's all we can do for now. So to help us do that is Edward Harrison, founder of Credit Write-Downs. Thank you for being on the show, Edward.
Good to be here.
Now, I just want to reflect for a moment because you were on one of our very first shows, which was months and months ago now. It's been, I think, about 7 months. What did we talk about? Do you remember?
Probably the same thing that we're talking about today.
Exactly. It was Europe. We have been in a suspended state of animation over this whole Eurozone crisis. I have to be honest, I'm sick of talking about it. And it's always the same. What are they going to do? What should they do? What shouldn't they do? What aren't they doing? Edward, at this point, what about doing nothing?
Well, you know, it's funny you say that you're sick of it. I bet you the policymakers are sick of it too. And so eventually, before I get back to the question of doing nothing, obviously what's eventually going to happen is they're going to make an error. You know, they're in this constant state of stress trying to do something. Eventually they're going to do the wrong thing that's going to blow up the whole system.
Okay, wait, hold on. Eventually they're going to do the wrong thing? Right now they have a clean record. They've never done anything wrong, because sitting here, I feel like net, they've been the problem.
They've been muddling through, certainly, but it hasn't been anything catastrophic. We're not in a Great Depression. We could still get there if they continue down the same path that they're going on and make a fundamental error.
Okay. Hold on, because one thing that I want to ask is, we're going through this information day after day that seems so catastrophic and material. Is what's going on materially changing and important on a daily basis, or does it just feel like that because there's always a new number to parse or a new meeting to dissect?
It just feels like that. But, you know, we are getting closer and closer to serious problems because, you know, the Eurozone is fundamentally over-indebted in the private sector. The banks are undercapitalized. It's the exact same problem that we have had and still do have to a certain degree in the U.S. And their solution, which is to deflate the public sector at the same time that the private sector is already deflating, is just going to lead to bank runs, causing people to take their deposits out of institutions, put them in what they think are safer institutions, maybe even put them in a mattress, take them out of the Eurozone entirely. And eventually you're going to get bank runs. And then that's when the whole thing will start to, you know, become really a problem. But right now, I think it's just a simmering problem. We've been here before. We were there with Italy. Just think about it. In November, we were talking about Italy. I wrote a post about what happens if Italy defaults. And, you know, I went through the scenario and all the CDS that are involved in that, and the bankruptcies and the bank runs, et cetera, and so forth. And I said, serious policymakers are thinking about allowing this to happen. Obviously, it would lead to another Great Depression. So here we are again. What happened with Italy? They came up with the goods. They came up with the dodge, an extend and pretend maneuver. I think that's exactly what you're going to see here again. There's not going to be a Grexit anytime in the near future, and we're going to continue on the same path until, at some point, something existential actually happens.
Okay, so as far as a status report update of the debt deflation in Europe, what is the main takeaway of where we are right now?
Where we are is the beginning of bank runs. If these accelerate, then they're going to have to come up with some goods. From a sovereign perspective, you know, Greece can be managed to a certain degree. It's Spain and Italy, that's where the rubber hits the road. So sovereign, it's Spain and Italy, and then the bank runs. Those are the real concerns in the Eurozone.
So what we've seen in Greece with millions of, actually, I mean, more than $1 billion euros being taken out of local banks, and with concerns that we saw in Bankia, are those what you're worried about as far as bank runs? Are you calling those bank runs?
Right. Those are slow motion bank runs, but real bank runs actually happen a lot quicker when the bank runs really happen. You think about Northern Rock, for example, or in the United States we had a bank run in 2008, which precipitated you know, some of the stuff in the first crisis that we had pre-Lehman. But I think that you go back to 1931 with Credit Anstalt from the Austrian bank that there was a bank run on. That created the preconditions for a generalized bank run. So these are the sort of knock-on effects that you would see.
And that's the kind of existential crisis that would really bring things to a head in Europe.
Exactly. And, you know, the ECB, they understand that. So as deflationary as the policy has been on the fiscal front in Europe, the ECB has just been pumping money like mad into the banks, trying to prop them up artificially, obviously, because they're bankrupt, in order to prevent this. So it's sort of an extend kind of maneuver in order to pretend that the institutions are solvent, so that at some point later on, when things are easier to do, they can resolve the institutions that are still insolvent. You think back to the LDC crisis, which basically happened as a result of the double dip recession of '80-'82 in the United States. These institutions in the U.S. that were exposed to the institutions in Latin America were completely insolvent, all of the big banks. And so we extended this whole problem way out for another 7 years until 1989. And at that point, that's when we had the savings and loan crisis. And so you can extend these things for a very long time.
Right. And the question also is, what are we overlooking in the meantime? Because we have been so focused on the play-by-play of this Eurozone crisis, not as much talk about other parts of the world. Is there a bigger picture that is being overlooked with problems brewing or slowdowns in Asia or Latin America or the U.S.?
Oh, 100%. I think that there is. I mean, you know, China, the bubble has burst in their housing. You know, their economy is slowing down incredibly rapidly. Everyone's talking about infrastructure spending, stimulus, et cetera, for them to counteract that. India, they're in a stagflationary environment. Inflation is still high. They have a huge amount of government debt, 70% government debt to GDP. At the same time, well,
that's not too bad looking at their friends in the U.S. or Europe. So,
well, you know, if you look at emerging economies, there's probably a lower bar for them before the whole thing starts to become a problem.
That's true.
And then they have their currency, which is actually depreciating. It's at an all-time low versus the U.S. dollar. Brazil's also decelerating.
Why are some of those currencies falling against the U.S. dollar or the euro with all of the problems, for example, going on with the euro?
Well, it's because they have not decoupled at the end of the day. People think that there's decoupling, but you know, all of these things are interrelated. You have the commodity cycle, which I think is probably topped out. You know, the commodity countries that are dependent upon oil and commodities that ship out to China, they're not as strong as they were in the past. They've started to cut their interest rates, and so as a result, their currencies have started to give way.
Before we go to break, some of these countries you're talking about, particularly China, had been driving global growth at a time when the U.S. and Europe have either been very slow or contracting. So what happens? What is the impact on the global economy if they do slow down a bit?
If they slow down, then we have the synchronous slowdown that we had in 2007. So any sort of major shock to the system will then tip the whole thing into recession.
Into 2008 redux.
Exactly.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk more about where we could end up beyond just Europe, but we'll still talk a little bit about it. We have Edward Harrison, founder of Credit Write-Downs, after the break. Also still ahead, who works more, Americans or Europeans? Well, one study says Americans win out there, and despite this, another suggests Americans aren't using their vacation time. We'll give you our 3 cents, but first, your closing market numbers.
What drives the world?
The fear-mongering used by politicians.
Who makes decisions?
Considerable breakthrough has already been made.
Who can you trust?
No one who is imbued with a global missionary zeal.
Where are we heading?
State-controlled capitalism is called fascism.
When nobody dares to ask, we do. RT, question more.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Tom Hartman. Welcome to The Big Picture.
Welcome to the Alona Show, where you'll get the real headlines with none of the mercy. The problem with the mainstream media today is that they're completely disconnected from the viewers and from what actually matters to those viewers. And so that's why young people just don't watch TV anymore. If they want news, they go online and read it. But we're trying to take those stories that people actually care about and transfer them back to TD.
Welcome back. We're talking to Edward Harrison about Europe and what's being overlooked by focusing on the crisis every second that there is news or numbers or a meeting. It was the 18th meeting of these Eurozone leaders. So let's get into what else is being overlooked, because you were talking about emerging economies before the break. What about the U.S.? Is this delaying a conversation in the U.S. that needs to happen, a serious conversation about the U.S. deficit, the U.S. debt? I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but it looks like we're going to run up against a fiscal cliff again. I hate that word, fiscal cliff, but basically another debt ceiling debate.
Right. The fiscal cliff is the interesting thing, actually, before I get into the fiscal cliff, it's interesting that Mexico is actually, in Latin America, the country that's doing the best, because they're associated with the United States in terms of the U.S. is pulling them up. The U.S., as far as developed economies goes, they're doing the best. But when the fiscal cliff happens, I think that if it actually does come to pass and we fall off the cliff, then that could be the exogenous shock that creates sort of a negative feedback loop with what's going on in Europe and the emerging markets, et cetera. So yeah, the fiscal cliff is something to watch.
So our politicians that are elected that can't agree on anything could hold the entire world hostage, the world economy, in your view?
Yeah, but let's take a step back. I think it's about the philosophical view of what to do when there's too much debt.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you'll hear a lot of people on and on. They'll say there's too much debt, and that's the truth. The real question is, what do you do about that? Mm-hmm. Do you write these debts down? Do you make these banks that were lending recklessly insolvent? Or do you somehow extend and pretend this?
Write it down, make the bank suffer. What's wrong with that?
I think that's really what most people would do, but that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that, we're starting to get frustrated with this particular way of solving the problem.
Do you think Europe is distracting a more serious conversation about that in the U.S., about the debt overhang here from happening?
Well, I'm not as concerned about the government debt overhang. I'm concerned about the private sector debt overhang. Because the real problem in all of these countries, including the U.S., is private sector debt. Mm-hmm. It's gone up 3 and 4 times the amount that it was a generation ago. Yeah. It's clearly unsustainable. The only reason that we've been able to run up so much debt is because interest rates have gone down. Mm-hmm. But we've reached the end of the cycle in terms of interest rates. When we were talking about the LDC crisis, 80-82, what precipitated the LDC crisis was Volcker raising rates up to 14 and 15%. And since then,
you're saying he did the wrong thing?
Well,
because a lot of people argue that that was what
well, that was
needed.
a great thing, but it precipitated the LDC crisis. And since that time, we've been on a downward trend from there. So we've had a tailwind in terms of interest rates. The reason that you hear people talking about quantitative easing all the time is because there's no other policy.
The U.S. is addicted to it?
No,
the stock market is addicted to it? It's propping up the stock market?
Interest rates are at 0%.
Yeah.
If interest rates were at 5%, you would see the Fed cutting interest rates instead. Mm-hmm. The reality is we're at the end of the line in terms of this whole private sector leveraging. Mm-hmm. And
but why don't you think that the public sector debt is a problem? Because I know that you don't. And I know there's, ideological reasons for that. But what about when someone like Kenneth Rogoff comes out with research where him and Carmen Reinhart looked at 50 countries across 26 periods of public debt overhangs where the government pushed debt to GDP over 90% for at least 5 years. And they found that the long-lasting effects were real GDP dropping an average of 25% at the end of the deleveraging periods. I mean, that's just one of the staggering impacts of debt overhang.
An effect there, but I think that the answer is that you really want to think about cause and effect. The cause was what you would call the malinvestment of the private sector malinvestment of the previous boom. Now we're in the bust, and what happens when you have a bust, when you're over leveraged because of excess credit growth, is people start to save more. And when people start to save more, the interplay between the private sector, the external sector, and the public sector means that more savings here is less savings there. Mm-hmm. The external sector and the public sector have less. So everything that's happening here must happen in exactly the exact proportion to the other side, on the other side.
But
so
how
to
do
the
you...
degree that people are saying that they don't want the government to spend more money, to have more deficits, what they're essentially saying is they don't want the private sector to have more savings. So the only way out of the deleveraging is to default, to have more defaults, to have the same level of savings in the private sector, but more defaults, to basically lower the credit immediately, which of course could precipitate a depression. I mean, there are few ways out. Now you look like you're not exactly understanding what I'm saying.
It sounds a little gibberishy to me, I have to be honest.
Let's say there are two people in the economy. Let's call me the public sector, and we'll call you the private sector.
Fair enough.
Now, if you have a surplus, if you're saving more money than you're making, I have a deficit. No, but it does happen. The private sector almost always has a surplus, and when the private sector has a surplus, the public sector, or the public sector and the trade sector in an open economy, having a deficit that's exactly offset by that. The reason you have a surplus is because there's an exact opposite deficit on the other side. That's the way it works. That's the national accounting. So
that's MMT talk you're talking about, right?
No, it's the reality. Everyone will tell you that there's an exact offset between private and public. You know, the perfect example is if in one particular, if we're in the same economy, you have $100 that you spend, and I only spend $80, and we're spending to each other. Obviously, there's a $20 deficit surplus that's happening between you and me. So the $20 surplus or deficit that one of us has to be exactly offset by the other. That's the reality.
There you go. The reality of the U.S. situation, all under 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Edward Harrison, for educating me today, and our audience, hopefully, too. I appreciate you being on the show. That was Edward Harrison, founder of Credit Write-Downs. All right, let's wrap up with loose change. Dimitri, Shannon, copper has been a hot commodity. People are stealing it. Copper theft has been plaguing towns across America. You can see it laid out in reports like this.
From Joe Jack's Cafe, a large AC unit was taken early Friday, May 11th. That's around the same time a similar unit was stolen from Harvey's Hot Dogs across the street. Much of the stolen copper from appliances can end up in scrap metal yards.
And now, even J.P. Morgan wants in on the copper industry. The bank is planning to launch an ETF, an exchange-traded fund, backed by physical copper. According to the Financial Times, though, U.S. manufacturers are opposed. They are revolting against the idea, saying the product would grossly and artificially inflate prices and wreak havoc on the U.S. and the global economy. Yeah, sounds about right for J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, well,
of course they want to do this.
They're in the business of creating derivative missiles. And this is another thing, but this is, ETFs are like, aircraft carriers, and they're just going to bring this thing in, and they're just going to pump up this market. Why is the average guy going to invest in a copper ETF? And the problem is this is something
that you use. This is an industrial metal. This isn't a precious metal.
Right, and again, this goes to the fact that they're looking for havens. And what does some broker at Merrill Lynch know about copper? Nothing. He's going to sell you this ETF. He's going to get you to invest in it. You're going to pump up the value of copper. You're going to wreak havoc with this market, and then you're going to create these distortions, okay? And
imagine that. J.P. Morgan going in, messing everything up, screwing over people everywhere to make profits.
This is what these bankers do. They manufacture derivatives. This is a derivative. They're like, you know what? Let's make some more money. Let's just create a copper ETF and sell it. And then I'll make my Christmas bonus, and I'll get my Mercedes.
The whale thing didn't work out. Let's sell some copper. Let's move on. Two studies caught our attention. We want to bring them to yours. First, Americans work 30% more than Americans. This study says it's largely due to America's lower taxes and higher divorce rates, according to them. I don't know if I buy that. Second, Americans don't seem to be taking any time off, according to a poll conducted by Harris Interactive for JetBlue. Take a look.
About 57% of Americans had unused vacation days at the end of 2011. and most left an average of 11 days on the table. According to the financial information company SageWorks, employers aren't complaining. Their profits per employee are at a 10-year high. One reason?
Unbelievable. You know, I have to admit, I can relate to this story. I'm one of those figures. I haven't taken a day off this year.
No, me and Edward were talking about this in the green room, all right? We both agree with this, okay? Americans are overworked. It's inefficient. This is ridiculous. You work people to the ground. They don't take vacation time. And then the people that work, you have people that are unemployed or underemployed. Then you have people that work like animals.
Yeah, and the people that work like animals just burn out, and then they can get replaced by any number of those unemployed Americans.
Right, but then they're not efficient, they're not good at their job. The point is you decrease the value of the product, you create burned out workforce, unhappy people, a nation of zombies that ends up being ruled over by technocrats in Brussels and Washington, and then you get this bubble of inequality and disequilibria and explosions, lots of explosions.
Shannon?
Well, it's obviously working because I have taken vacation, so I'm kind of hiding over here, but obviously I'm shamed into that because of the system.
Yeah,
Shannon,
well,
no, you haven't taken a vacation.
You shouldn't be shamed by the herd. Anyway.
You take lots of vacations, Lauren. I'm the guy that doesn't take any vacations here.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
I'm the guy that works like an animal in this place.
I'm being defamed. Let's move on. I have not. We hear a lot about Simpson Bowls. That was the deficit deal that didn't really go anywhere in Congress officially, but it was aimed at reining in the U.S. deficit. What we don't hear about is how awesomely candid Simpson, one part of Simpson Bowls, has become post-public service. Here he is. Here's a snippet of him arguing with host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur.
You are destroying the Social Security system solvency. I'd put that in your pipe and drag on it.
Did you hear that? That's amazing. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Go Google this guy. He's hilarious. But quickly, now he has some choice words for the California Alliance of Retired Americans who have come out against Simpson Bowls. They're a senior citizen group. Take a look at what he said. This is just part of it. What a wretched group of seniors you must be to use the faces of the very people that we're trying to save, because I guess they use some young people on their pamphlets, while the greedy geezers like you use them as a tool and a front for your nefarious bunch of crap. You must feel some sense of shame for shoveling out this bowl. The rest is history. So, I mean, we can just leave. What can we say after that?
He rolled it up and smoked it.
Yeah, well, all right. Go read the report. That's always what he comes back to. I'm going to go do that now because we're out of time. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for watching, and please make sure to come back tomorrow. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Lauren Lister. Give us feedback on the show at youtube.com/capitalaccount, and also see us in HD on Hulu, hulu.com/capitalaccount. From everyone here, thanks for watching and have a great night.